Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chats on the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and publishing. And today we have a very special guest. I'm delighted to welcome to the show, whose name immediately, he just told me how to pronounce your last name, but I've forgotten it, so I'm going to mispronounce it. Keith Riegert.
Let's see.
Yes, publishing CEO and tech CEO of Ulysses Press. I don't know what it is. Somebody tells me their name. Immediately my brain's like, right, let's just throw that out of there. So yeah, yes. Anyway, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, well, we're delighted that you took the time to speak to us. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland, and thanks for coming on, Keith. Yeah, so you're the CEO of Ulysses Press and Perfect Bound, right? And you are, besides doing the publishing and, dealing with, it sounds like, the paperback distribution side of it and all that, you've gotten into sort of using AI to streamline a lot of your processes. And that is something that interests us in the sense that for writers and self-publishers, often the AI side of it is, a lot of them are not interested in using it to help them with the writing itself, but with the making their lives easier, allowing them to spend less time doing all that extra stuff that writers don't really want to do. If they can offload some of that to AI, I think that's where the interest lies in the community these days. So it sounds like you have a lot of insight into that. So we're really happy to have you on to talk about that sort of thing. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your companies and what you're doing with AI, and then we can go from there.
Absolutely. So Ulysses Press was started by my parents 40 years ago. And so I'm a second generation publisher. I've been in the industry for about 20 years and started as an acquisitions editor. Got very into data and started studying statistics. Went on to Hachette to become their associate director of analytics for the marketing strategy team before coming back to Ulysses to take over. So Ulysses is a bit different from your traditional publisher. We do all of our acquisitions in reverse. We do very heavy data mining, looking for areas in the publishing industry that are underpublished but have a large identifiable built-in audience. And then we will actually go out and find the expert to write that book for that audience. So we found that AI has been really helpful, not only for us in fleshing out some ideas that we want to publish into, but also giving it as a tool to our authors to help them through that very difficult process of outlining a book and coming up with ideas for chapters or content. The one thing that we absolutely do not do is publish AI-generated content. That includes images and text. We have very strict rules within our contracts about preventing AI-generated content from being in our books, in part because of the potential for copyright violation and plagiarism, but also in part because AI material cannot, at this point, be copyrighted. So that is my Ulysses side. On the Perfect Bound side, I started a tech platform called Perfect Bound during the pandemic, which was for independent publishers and printers because we were having a lot of supply chain issues. And that has now turned into a full suite of services for publishers that allows them to do everything from title management to pay royalties. And we offer distribution for publishers on that platform through Simon & Schuster. And yeah, I got into AI right at the beginning, started playing around with DALL-E for image generation and then ChatGPT for other projects. And my first real holy crap moment was I asked ChatGPT to write some Python code for me that would scrape a retailer's website and return all of the titles that they were selling. And I had spent years learning how to code in Python. And in 5 seconds, this thing wrote better, cleaner code than I'd ever written. And it was at that moment I was like, this is serious. I need to devote a lot of time to figuring out how we are going to use this going forward and what the impact on our industry is going to be. And I think it's going to be pretty profound.
Yeah, it's going to be profound across all industries. And, I have the same sort of experience with, I used to be a coder, but I haven't touched code in many years. And that was something I had done as well. More recently, I asked ChatGPT to create, a game. I described the game. Actually, it helped me develop the idea for the game, and then I asked it to write the code, and it did, and it worked. And it was like, it's amazing to me. Like, it's amazing that it can do all that. And I didn't even look at the code to see how good it works. It was like, it works, I'm good. But yeah, I mean, there are so many ways that it can be used to help authors, and I think it's really interesting that you're using it in your own business in the publishing. That whole idea of the reverse acquisitions, they will basically use AI to say, okay, what is, I guess, an underserved market? What is something that's hot right now? What is whatever? It comes back with the information, then you go out and you say, okay, find a freelance writer to write this book for us. And I think that's really interesting. So you don't actually sign any traditional authors. You just, everything is basically the way you described.
Yeah, I would say 95% of our acquisition process is that way. We don't, traditionally work with agents. We do a little bit more now because what we've seen from the data-driven publishing operation is, if everybody is trying to play Moneyball, then the Moneyball really doesn't work. Everybody's acting on the same data, and that arbitrage opportunity just disintegrates pretty quickly. So we think that there are real benefits to signing books that have some sort of protective moat around them, whether that's a licensed cookbook or a big author or a podcaster who has their own platform, where that type of project cannot be replicated by anybody who wants to create the next book on metal detecting or something like that. Which, please don't steal that. That's still self.
Damn it.
So you're typically doing nonfiction, I guess?
Yeah, we are very heavy nonfiction. We also have a children's imprint, but the beating heart of our company is nonfiction.
I always find nonfiction such an interesting thing to market because it's a different animal. Nonfiction is about solving problems.
Yes, and you end up with a lot more competition from things like ChatGPT that can answer a lot of the questions that people might have in the past gone to buy a book on that topic. But what we're seeing is there's still a huge demand for material that is expertly crafted and has a real voice behind it. And then, for fiction, you're also dealing with a lot of competition from anything from Netflix to TikTok and every other form of entertainment. But I think that publishing in general has this really unique advantage where the product that we are producing is an analog product. It is a break from your screen. And I think that has been the real driver in the continued growth of print books and, that plateau of ebook sales that we saw 15 or 20 years ago that hasn't really changed. So I'm a big believer in this medium and this industry. I think it's got a special place in the future.
I mean, books are still being published. People are still buying them. Yeah. I bought a book just the other day that everyone's reading on TikTok.
Yes. Yeah. I read that. So what kind of tools can authors use? I mean, I definitely see as a publisher, there are so many ways, it sounds like, that you can really use AI and you can take the data. Actually, before we get into that, yeah, one question I was wondering is, are you using, sort of out of the box, let's say API calls to whatever, ChatGPT or whatever, or have you built your own sort of flavor of AI in-house so that you can crunch, more specific data than just saying, okay, do, like you were saying, everybody's using the same data, so it makes more sense if you have your own data to sort of sift through.
Yeah, so I'll give you some examples of the way that we're using AI in the different companies. And I'll start by saying that, my directive to our team has been to try to use it for at least an hour a day, every day. And the easiest way to do that is to try it out for whatever you're doing. So if you're writing an email, try it. If you're, coming up with a book outline, try it. If you're brainstorming titles, go on to ChatGPT and ask it to help you out. And the way that I want them to approach it is that this is not something that is going to do your work for you. It is a highly intelligent, very inexperienced assistant that is going to work with you. With the brainstorming of titles, for example, it often will come up with a word that none of us were thinking of in the acquisitions process, and that's immediately worth its effort. The other things that we've done, we are very much working with out-of-the-box options, ChatGPT, Anthropic. We have Intercom for our websites so that readers can go onto the websites and, type in, I'm looking for a book for my brother. He's really into cooking. Can you make recommendations? And that is a huge improvement over the Algolia-powered search bar that we have, where you have to know the title or the author to find what you're looking for. Right. We are using a lot of custom GPTs. So we have the paid pro version of ChatGPT where we can go on and turn off training so that it's not going to release our private information to the rest of the users on ChatGPT. And we will do things like, upload our contract templates and create a contract generator. We recently uploaded 5 years worth of our sales conference scripts and the corresponding tip sheets that go along with them. And now junior editors who are just getting into the flow of pitching books to Simon & Schuster can just upload a tip sheet and it will generate the first draft of a sales conference script for them.
Wow.
And yeah, it's fantastic. And that, that used to be a task that would take our team a full week of work to get it ready, run through our presentations, revise them, and finally get to the point where we were ready to present to Simon & Schuster. And this has been a huge time savings. So what we've seen on the publishing side is that this is saving us about 20% of our work, or we're getting a 20% increase in productivity because it's cutting down the time that it takes to do some of these tasks. And for us, we're a lean team, we're 13 people, and a 20% increase means that for every 5 employees we have, we're gaining a 6th for, $100 a month in ChatGPT payments, and that's phenomenal. It also makes me very scared for the future of employment in this industry, because the more efficient we can get, the more productive we can get with the very thin margins that we're all dealing with in publishing, the more the bigger the chance that our industry is going to continue to shrink, and these operations are going to get leaner and leaner. So that's what I see as the big downside to using these tools. But it's great at, it can write a press release from an Amazon link. It can analyze a lot of our data in the same way that a junior stats major would analyze that data in Excel. And these are skills that our English literature major employees have never wanted to develop, and now they have access to it. So yeah, we are trying it for everything and seeing where it works and where it doesn't, and then seeing how fast it's changing, and it's changing really quickly.
I find it so interesting what you're saying about like the margins getting trimmed. I mean, we've seen since self-publishing started, the mainstream publishers are ditching copy editors and ditching proofreaders and stuff like that. And it's like, it's just like relentlessly marching on, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I did an analysis a couple weeks ago and found out that our median print run over the last 15 years has gone up 75% in unit cost, and our median list price has gone up 3% during the same time. And that is pretty much across the board in publishing. The cost of goods is rising, but we have not kept those list prices up with inflation. So you are seeing those margins just thin out more and more.
Yeah, and you can't keep rising. Everyone's upset about how much everything's rising in price, and it's just impossible to keep up and not sort of push away your customers because the price just gets too high. So you end up having to eat those costs, and then you make less money, and
you have less copy.
Yeah, but like the way I think about it, we always see. Whenever new technology comes along, we always see a big shift, big paradigm shift, and people lose their jobs. The horse and buggy makers, all of a sudden had no job when Ford came out with the motor car, right? So I'm hopeful, at least, that while AI is going to shift and it's going to be painful at first, I think that new opportunities will rise, and we will find other things that we can move to and have AI do just, what it's good at. And then we find the new things that it is not good at. And those are the things that we sort of shift to. And then eventually we keep elevating our world. But, that's the optimistic view. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think the idea of, so you were saying you make these custom GPTs, you feed in all your information. I love that, because then, nobody has to sort of even analyze all that data when they want to, look at your sales conference stuff or whatever. They just sort of ask it questions and it knows specifically about your data, right? And I'm thinking about how authors can sort of do that, like authors with, say, big series. They could feed it all of their books and be able to use it as an assistant to remind them about things that have happened and plot threads that have not been resolved yet, and the eye color, or whether the person has siblings. You don't have to, you used to be that you have to keep this Bible, or you forget things and you have to go searching through your books. I mean, at least for me, I have a terrible memory. Maybe some authors can remember everything. I look at George R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones, and I read those books and I think, I don't know how he keeps it all straight, right? So the ability to actually be able to do that with your own library is really fascinating to me, especially when you have a big group of books. Do you see any authors using it like that?
Yeah, and I mean, the tool that has really transformed that is Notebook LM. Have you guys used this from Google?
No.
So it's incredible. You can create these notebooks, and the file sizes are enormous. You can upload 25 million words to a single notebook. So to your point, like you want to upload your entire series, you can now upload that series. In 5 minutes, it will create this remarkable 2-person podcast about the material that you've uploaded. I'm happy to give you an example. I've got a good one for a Korean-French cookbook or something, French-Korean cookbook. And then you can ask questions of it. You can create a study guide. You can create outlines for all of the material that you've uploaded. And you can actually have a conversation with this material. So it's tools like that that I think if you have a body of work that you want to be able to really interact with in a revolutionary new way, this is the future. And, Google has made it free. I think the way that they're going to get you is in the storage fees, because you're uploading a lot of stuff that's going to be in your Google Drive. But it's remarkable. And you then take that outside of just using it for your own purposes. That podcast that it has generated automatically could be used as a marketing vehicle for you. You could use it to sell subsidiary rights or send it to scouts. And I think that the possibilities there are just endless.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love that idea. I'm going to definitely be looking at that. So if you were to pick other sort of ways that authors can use AI to sort of streamline their own, especially self-published authors who are doing everything, right? And like I said before, it's so many of the authors that we work with, that's the big complaint is they just want to write, but they have to do all this other stuff. They have to be an expert in marketing and advertising, and writing blurbs and covers and, just the myriad of things that go into publishing. And if they are able to streamline some of that, I think that is one of the ways that they're open to using AI. And this is a topic that, we've talked about a lot in blogs and podcasts, but I'm always looking for more insight from other people about, what it is that they're seeing people use it for, or their own ideas about how authors can use it. So you definitely are somebody who would have that sort of insight. So what are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so let's take publishing through KDP as an example. All right, you're gonna want to optimize your title for what is one of the most powerful search engines in the world. And there's a lot that you can do there. So one example is Vendor Central releases the top 1 million search terms from Amazon every week. And we have built a custom GPT where we uploaded the entire data set for a week, this huge CSV file, to ChatGPT. And all of a sudden, instead of having a CSV that you have to weed through, you can ask questions of it. What are the top adult coloring book keywords right now that I could use on my KDP page? The other thing that you can do is create a GPT where you can upload your manuscript and say, here are the best practices for writing a strap line for Amazon and a description for the book. Can you take a stab at writing the first draft of this for me? And, you can put in all of the little SEO best practices of this should have bullet points. This should, contain these 6 different keywords. It makes that process, which I agree is just, it's not what you want to be doing. It makes it so much easier. Another area that we have really leaned into is with cover direction and cover design and storyboarding, especially for children's books. So if you use a platform like Midjourney or Dolly, you can create these incredible illustrations that are very close to what you would want for a final cover for your book. And then, the issue is that Midjourney and Dolly are trained on the entire internet. This is a very dangerous thing to publish and put out into the world, especially if you're doing an offset print run that's going to cost you a bunch of money. You don't want to end up with a cease and desist. So what we'll do is we'll come up with exactly what we want this cover to look like, and then send it off to an illustrator and say, put your own spin on this, but this is what we have come up with. And at that point, you're going from really relying on the imagination of a third-party cover designer to having a lot more control over what your book is going to look like, even if you don't have those design skills yourself. Another tool that we've really leaned into is Photoshop's generative AI capabilities. One of my favorite things is you can take an image that maybe is the perfect image for your cover, but it has the wrong aspect ratio. And the generative AI will just fill in the rest of the image in the exact same design or the same content as the original image. And now you have something that you can use for a cover design or an interior image. It also has the ability to add generative content to it. So you want to, put old coins on this table for your medieval novel or something. You can add that in, and all of Photoshop's content, their LLM has been trained on their licensed stock images, so you can feel safer about publishing that. There has been some worry that some of the training has gone outside of the stock image collection. We're actively monitoring that, but it is the one tool that we feel very comfortable with in using. And then you have InDesign. InDesign can now pick out stock images that it will suggest that you use in a cookbook or a travel book. And what I'm anticipating in the next couple of years is authors are going to be able to take a Word manuscript and drop it into InDesign and say, I want this to look like a Chronicle style cookbook. I make it, and it will lay it out for you, suggest images. And it's really like the potential for AI, especially in self-publishing, is to make a lot of these tasks very, very easy in the next couple of years.
I love the idea of brainstorming the covers, because the AI art is ridiculous now. I have an Adobe account, and it can generate art, and some of it, Adobe, it's bad compared to other ones, but it can look pretty good. I love the idea of designing the cover you want and then handing it off to a designer and say, that's kind of what I want, make it using real. That's great, because then you kind of get over the moral quandary. And Craig, you're always going on about how useful AI is for brainstorming.
Yeah, and that's the thing I use it for the most. And I think that I agree that that's a phenomenal way to not get around, but to feel good about sort of the ethical side that a lot of people are worried about when they're saying, okay, it's trained on all this data. Is it stealing? Is it copyright infringement? But at the same time, you often have a vision of what you want, and to convey that to the designer isn't always straightforward. You might say something, and then they come back and they give you something completely different. If you're able to work with the AI in minutes, you can come up with exactly what you want. And if it's not, you can have it just tweak it and tweak it and tweak it, and you don't have to spend hours or days with a designer going back and forth. And then you could just say, okay, here's what I like. This is exactly pretty much what I want. Maybe you put your own flair on it. But at least you're giving them that starting point, and there's much less chance that they're going to go off the rails and create something completely different.
Exactly. And within those prompts, you can say things like, I want the dragon to be at the top of the image with ample space in the middle. This is where my title is going to go. And really come up with a layout that's going to work for you at no cost, essentially.
Yeah. And the idea of using it for children's books as well. And I'm sure you can use it for, adult coloring books, like you mentioned before. You can have it generate all sorts of stuff, and then be able to just pass that off, still keep somebody employed, your designer employed, but not have this worry that you're doing something unethical, or it's going to come back and bite you if the laws eventually get passed, that are against the AI, generation stuff. So yeah, I think that is really incredible idea. Yeah. So You'd mentioned something before, that Vendor Central, the top million search terms. Is that something? Is that a service you pay for, and then they're basically scraping Amazon to come up with those search terms? I've never heard of that one either.
Yeah. So if you have like an Amazon seller account, or we have Vendor Central through Simon and Schuster, you have access to those search terms. But there are plenty of other organizations that do the same sort of search term mining. So we use Seller App, which is a really good resource for identifying keywords. You can do reverse ASIN lookups on comp titles and find out, how people are getting to this comp title, so that you can include those keywords in your own work. But the data from Vendor Central and from Amazon Seller Central is very unwieldy. You're talking about millions of observations, multiple variables, and so having to try to deal with that on your own in an Excel spreadsheet is next to impossible.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's fabulous that the idea that you then pump it into ChatGPT and then you just talk to it and ask it questions. I think I'm just thinking about it in terms of like from the research side of it, when authors are trying to figure things out. And keywords is actually where I was thinking about that. I was thinking about search terms in terms of keywords that authors can use to add so that their own books will be more discoverable.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I highly suggest checking out Seller App. They have a free version where you can look up keywords, but that's one of the things that I always encourage my friends when they're writing a book is, do the research up front, see what other titles are out there, how they're selling, what does the Amazon rank, what does this look like on Google Trends, and you don't want to spend years of your life crafting something that has no audience, and when you bring it out to market, you really want it to be able to find the audience and have the audience find the book.
Yeah, I mean there's two different sort of ways of sort of paths there, right? The one is before you even write the book, if you're searching for that kind of thing, and then there's the after you've written it, how do you make sure people find it, the keywords and all that. And I know that we've used Publisher Rocket before. Roland, you've had more experience with that, but they sort of do that kind of thing too, where you can use it to find, I think, keywords that are being used. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same as that, but I know that they have a way of telling you about popular keywords as well.
Yeah.
You're on mute there, Roland.
They've gone quite far in AI now. They've evolved a lot in terms of finding things. I mean, it is amazing to get your own little brain to go out and do these tasks that would take, like, for me, I'm like super ADHD, so the methodical task that you want to do, I wouldn't be able to do without suddenly, going off and making a cup of coffee and then switching on the TV and then walking the dog and then this and that. And the AI never quits.
Yeah. I mean, that's the scary thing and the huge benefit. And then when it comes to, marketing, I think that's the next really big area that there are huge use cases for. So there's a great company that is operating right now called Shimmer. Have you guys come across Shimmer in publishing? So what they're doing is they will take your manuscript, upload it into their proprietary LLM, and then it will create these incredible AI generated illustrations that you can use for marketing on Facebook and Instagram. And then they have the AI doing the sort of multi-armed bandit A/B testing that you would use through something like Hootsuite to optimize these advertisements on Facebook and Instagram, find the right audience, limit the cost per click. And I think that's really one of the big use cases right now in AI, is using it to dramatically improve marketing across all of your titles. And I'm anticipating that a lot of those tools are going to roll into Amazon advertising, and obviously it's already there for TikTok. But this is the other, big time suck that I think all authors face, is how do you engage with your audience online, and how do you foster awareness for your titles in a competitive landscape?
Yeah, I've definitely experimented with using AI to generate different ad pieces for Facebook, the titles and the descriptions and all that stuff, and come up with a whole whack load of them so that I can put them all in and test them out. One of the other things we sort of experimented with recently was taking these podcasts, right, and being able, so the idea of pulling clips from them so that we could post them on social media as small little clips. But the problem is, you got to sit through it and try to figure out what the good clips are. Well, I downloaded the transcript from YouTube, pushed it into ChatGPT and said, hey, give me some and with I had it with the timestamps. So I said, give me some interesting clips that I can use to pull and get authors interested in listening, and it would give me the timestamps. Oh, listen from here to here, and it give me a brief description of what they were talking about, and then I'd go and look at it and be like, that is a good clip, and then we'd pull it and get a little thing from it. It's really interesting that.
I mean, it's the research assistant, right?
Yeah. Not having to sit through listening to ourselves talk for hours on end. It's also a good time saver.
I like doing that because it can only use the material you give it, whereas the inherent problem with AI is if you ask it to search its own large language database, it can go a bit wonky. Like I once, just to see what it would do, asked it to research Frida McFadden, who's this wonderful thriller author who's only been around since 2018, and it didn't have anything on her, so it made up a Frida McFadden that wrote children's books, and it's so asking it to read a specific thing and then glean it from that actually provides a lot of value because it can't go wonky.
Yeah, it will still hallucinate in those situations. You have to keep your eye on what it's producing, but the more limited the data is that you're putting in to ask it about, the better. But we still we have set up a contract analyzer where you upload a 20-page contract and it pulls out the key details. What is the advance? What are the royalties? What rights do we own? And even there, 20 pages, it'll sometimes hallucinate some stuff that is not helpful.
And I mean, that's another reason why, I'm not super concerned at this point that it's going to replace people completely, because we do still have to do fact checking, and we do still hear all the time about, it's getting things wrong, or, it's better than the days when we all used to it would say, oh, I got this, mark on my arm, and go to WebMD and then find out, oh, we have cancer. Wait a second, everything I put into WebMD says I might have cancer. But, it does better than that, but it still isn't, at the level where we can totally trust what it says and what it does, which, if you're coming up with fiction and you're writing fiction, you want it to have some imagination. But when you're trying to deal with nonfiction, or you're trying to deal with facts and contracts and stuff, you do not want it to make stuff up.
Yes, exactly.
I heard a story the other day of, and I don't even know if it's true. This was told at my poker game, so but they were saying that they had heard about this lawyer who went and tried in front of a judge and brought up a case and said and gave all this this cases or whatever, and none of them existed. And he ended up losing his job, getting disbarred, whatever. Right? It's just, who knows if that's true? Why wouldn't you just have one of your your assistants check that stuff out? But I think people become too reliant on it. They become lazy. They start to think, okay, it's done really well for me now. I can cut some corners. I don't really need to check it. It's always fine. And then the one time you don't is when it'll come back.
Exactly. Yeah, that is the root of my use it as an assistant. Someone straight out of college who doesn't know what they're doing, but is a very capable person. You're still going to check that material before you send it off to your boss or put it out in public. So that's
yeah.
you know.
And I guess so the Notebook LM thing that you were talking about earlier, that's a Google product. Is that based off of their Gemini, or is that just something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds a lot like a custom GPT where you just upload it, but then it's creating a podcast, or it's basically, yeah, it sounds like it's free to use it too, right?
Yeah, so it's a bit more, it kind of leads you a little bit more than ChatGPT would. So do you want to create a study guide? Do you want to talk to this?
Okay.
ChatGPT is a little bit more open. And then the podcast thing is just really cool. I mean, I can see that becoming a huge tool for, driving subsidiary rights sales in the future, where you create a podcast in every language and all of a sudden you can sell it everywhere.
Can we have it use our voices so that we can have it do the podcast for us?
Yeah.
Well, they did that with Joe Rogan, didn't they? They did Joe Rogan and who was
Steve
it?
Jobs. Steve Jobs.
That's
Joe
it,
Rogan interviewing Steve Jobs. I heard that. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, synthetic. I mean, that's a whole other thing is, how deep do we want to get into synthetic narration for audiobooks? Obviously, the cost savings is huge, but you're eliminating an enormous amount of jobs, and you're potentially going to really devalue the perceived value of audiobooks if it's so easy to make an audiobook and put it out there, which is what we saw happen when ebooks came out. The artificially low prices of print books are really a reflection of ebooks becoming the new mass market trade paperback.
Yeah. Although, I have seen things change. I know when I was writing actively 10 years ago, romance, basically when I'd go to the top 100 list, I'd say 80 to 90% of the books were 99 cents. And it was a race to the bottom at that point, right? Like when we started, it wasn't, but then as time went on, that's where it went. Now, when I go to the top 100, I almost cannot find a 99-cent book, which is good. I'm glad that they've sort of course corrected on that, because authors can't make much money getting basically 30 cents per copy from Amazon.
Yeah.
So things sort of like go in waves, but we're definitely seeing some shifts, and hopefully some of them will be more positive over time, and as we sort of adjust to this new norm of AI in our lives. But it sounds like that's something that you have really done well with your company. I mean, I imagine that this whole shift to AI came from your generation. This wasn't something that my guess is it wasn't something that your parents had started before handing the reins to you, right? So you've taken the company into sort of the future. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I will say it's very difficult to get anybody in publishing to use AI. And again, like I wish it didn't exist.
But listen, but if nobody else in publishing is using it and it's giving you a competitive advantage, I think that's great for you. You don't want them to use it.
Absolutely. But I do want the industry to continue to move forward and innovate. And it's a tough industry to do it.
I mean, it's an old industry. I mean, you mentioned that Ulysses Press, your parents founded.
Yeah.
Yeah, my great grandfather was a printer and a publisher, so it's been in my family for 4 generations. I mean, it is amazing to think that this is an industry that still continues and probably isn't going anywhere. So things do tend to move slowly. And one of the things I think that's really been dramatic is the fact that independent publishers and self-publishers can jump on things and do things at a rate that's just traditional publishers could never even hope to compete with.
Yeah. And I think that there's some really positive potential tools that are coming for readers as well. So have you guys used Rufus on Amazon yet?
No.
So Rufus is their AI search engine, and it has huge implications for the future of publishing, right? Instead of giving you this endless scroll of results that are based almost entirely on keywords and SEO content, it is actively looking through all of the information about a book. So what are the reviews like? What is the topic of the book? And instead of giving you that endless scroll of results, it's giving you 3 recommendations. And to me, this indicates a future in which it gets much harder to just throw out some garbage, some AI written content onto Amazon and accidentally sell 2,000 copies of it. It's going to really become more of a meritocracy where the best books are the winners. Now, on the other hand, that means that discoverability is going to get a lot harder, and we're going to have to relearn everything about marketing a book on Amazon. But I can definitely see pros and cons to
I see a lot of cons. I see, if everyone's looking for, a fantasy book about dragons, and the only, the first thing that comes up is Game of Thrones, and the next thing is, Lord of the Rings, and the next thing is, whatever. Nobody else is ever going to get discovered, and if that's the only way that people are searching, it's a little bit worrisome for new authors. Why would you ever take a chance on a new author? Because they'll never come up on the search. They won't have reviews yet. They won't have all that stuff.
That is the huge issue. Yeah. And Amazon's advertising platform is a $40 billion operation for them, and that would potentially cannibalize it pretty severely.
Or it'll become a huge.
Did you say billion with a B?
Yeah.
I just think there's a big conflict there too, right? Like if all of a sudden, suspiciously their search results start giving you books that from heavy advertisers.
Oh yeah, I mean there's definitely going to be a pay to play element to it, and I totally agree with you that category killers in that situation become ever more dominant, and it becomes really hard for publishers and authors who are releasing frontlist to get discovered.
Which is daunting, but there's an opportunity. Well, we're nearly approaching the top of the hour, actually, so I'm sorry. We're going to have to wrap this up, but that's kind of a not necessarily a positive thing to wrap it up on, but it's a very realistic thing about what's next moving in with the industry. So, Keith, we want to find out all about Ulysses Press, all about everything you do. We're going to ask for all those details in a second. I just wanted to ask Craig if he had any final thoughts or questions.
I agree. It's sort of like it is a down note to end on, but it is sort of something that we want to think about. We, as authors, we want to keep in the back of our mind, because we always want to be watching out for that sort of thing. So thanks for coming on and talking about all this stuff. And most of it hasn't been so necessarily negative and worrisome, but I think you've given us a ton of different tools and ideas that authors can use to really streamline their writing and their business. And I'm going to look up half the things you mentioned here after this call. So thanks again for coming on and giving us this time.
My pleasure. And I have a deck that I just presented at the Sharjah Book Fair. I'll send it over to you. It's public and you can share it as you will. But I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you guys both so much for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time to join us. And it was quite eye-opening. So, Keith, where can people find out more about Ulysses Press and more about you?
So ulyssespress.com is our publishing company. If you want to check out Perfect Bound, it's perfectbound.io. And you can always find me at keithriegert.com.
Excellent. Well, we will make sure to pop a link down in the description of this video. So once you've finished listening to this, I urge you to scroll down there and go and check out Ulysses Press. Go and check out more about Keith. And you know what? While you scroll down there, you can't help but notice you passed that huge empty comments section. Why don't you show Keith how much you appreciate him taking the time to come and speak to us today by leaving him a comment or a question or a thought or anything like that? Like, great cardigan, Keith. Like cardigan. It's fantastic. It's cardigan season.
It's like fall here in New York. So
And while you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give that like icon a double tap, and of course there is a bell icon. If you click on that, every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked, you will get an alert. And of course we will be back with a brand new episode of Fully Booked next week. So until then, cheerio.